Recently, we took a look at the $40 arcade box. It was an emulation console that had over 30,000 games on it. It seemed like a lot of you guys were interested in that device, and the company noticed and they sent me out this Pawky Box, which is another version of pretty much the same thing from the looks of it to me. Specs-wise, everything is identical, but this comes with a few extras, and I'm not sure with the build, as they do offer multiple builds here. And this one that I'm showcasing today has over 50,000 games on it, and they're supposed to be selling this for $50 coming up for their little Black Friday deal, I guess. Now, the main difference here is this comes with wireless controllers, and honestly, these wireless controllers are not even worth $1 to me. These are some of the worst controllers I've ever felt in my entire life. They just suck. I mean, I hope this isn't really what the big deal with this new version is, as it just doesn't make sense to charge extra for that wireless controller. The arcade box came with a wired controller, and while that controller sucks too, it's not anywhere near as bad as this wireless one that the Pawky Box comes with. So I wanted to hook this thing up and see, is there any difference here? There's over 50,000 games on it, so that's a difference, right? The price is almost the same as the arcade box, at least for their Black Friday deal. So let's go ahead and boot this up and check it out. So upon booting the system up, I do notice a lot of similarities to the $40 arcade box, but with this being a 256 gigabyte build with over 50,000 games, are we getting any additional systems? And it does seem like we may be getting a few here that they have added, like Sharp X6800. I don't recall being on the previous build. Same thing with Amiga and Pokemon Mini. I also noticed they put a whole separate category for NES hacks as well. Now, with over 50,000 games, just those handful of systems there can't add the complete 20,000 games, right? So they have overinflated a few systems versus the previous build, the arcade box. So on this Pawky Box, looks like Nintendo DS, we have thousands of games, whereas the previous build only had a couple dozen maybe. Nintendo 64 as well, looks like the complete library. Neo Geo CD, they've added the complete library. PSP, they've added a bunch of games, and the same thing with PS1. Does look like a few other systems they may have added additional games to as well. And I did notice CPS 1, 2, and 3, the Capcom fighting games, that category has been pulled back. It's not exposed on the default build here. You can, make your own category and have that show up itself as it is part of the theme, but those are all included in all the arcade stuff. They did add an additional arcade set, which is signified just by arcade. So you have arcade, MAME, and Final Burn Alpha. All your CPS stuff will be in Final Burn Alpha, but I do notice between the three different categories for arcade games, there are some similarities, some duplicates. It's bound to happen type of thing. And with arcade games, there's thousands upon thousands on this system. And just like the previous one, a lot of games are going to run just fine as far as your old school 8 and 16-bit games up to quite a few of the arcade games as well. But the problem arises with arcade games where some things just don't boot up. It's nearly impossible to test all the games on this system, but keep that in mind. The things I'm telling you will run, you shouldn't have an issue with. NES, TurboGrafx, Neo Geo, stuff like that. But you will find the sporadic arcade game that just gives you an error for whatever reason. It's going to be the same for a few other systems here and there, but for the most part, like I said, all that old school stuff will run fine. Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, all that stuff. It's just going to be the arcade games you run into problems. Dreamcast, Nintendo 64, just like the previous system, some games are going to be a little iffy. It's just the nature of the beast with these underpowered boxes here. They do a fine job, but once you start getting into that territory, it's when you start having issues. Now, you want to play stuff like Open Beats of Rage and Nintendo DS. I did do a follow-up video for this build to where showing you how to get things set up to actually be able to play those games. Put a card up top to check it out. But yeah, so far, I mean, between this box and the previous box for the 10 additional dollars that they're charging, or they're going to be charging anyway from what I noticed with their Black Friday sale, it doesn't seem bad if you're fine with paying a Chinese company to get a preloaded box. I mean, to each their own. I typically always advocate going the DIY route, but hey, I cover all this oddball stuff here and there. People sometimes ask me to, sometimes companies ask me to, sometimes I just think people are going to be interested, so I take a look at it. And I didn't think the previous one, the $40 box, was too bad. This one as well. I mean, you're getting the same performance out of it. It's not horrible for the price. And if you're fine with buying, you know, this kind of bootleggy type stuff, Soldier Boy'd up type of gaming system, it doesn't seem bad for the price. But I do think their normal price on this Pawky Box is closer to like $80 or $90. And with those controllers it comes with, they're just horrible. Like, I can't stand them. They are really bad. So I don't really look at that as like a reason to charge more for this device. If the controllers were good, then sure. But when the wired PS2 version controllers in the arcade box performed better and just felt better, even though those aren't that great either, it's kind of like, come on now, like, get some decent controllers, right? But with this system, just like the previous one, as I mentioned, you can use pretty much any controllers you want. It'll like prompt you to put in all the inputs to set up your controller that you use. So not a huge deal. It's just the included, you know, controllers here are just not great. So hopefully if you do buy something like this, you have additional controllers lying around that you can use on this for your own to, you know, kind of get away from the crap that they included there. So yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to like highly recommend something like this, but then also at the same time understanding that people do dig these type of devices, it's kind of hard to say, hey, it's crap, because it's not crap. It's just you have to have your expectations in check with this chipset, with the included software, what the performance is going to be, your 16-bit Atari, all your handheld stuff, your NES, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, 32X, Sega CD, TurboGrafx, Neo Geo, flawless, no problem. Dreamcast, Nintendo 64, that's when you're going to run into problems. PS1, for the most part, is pretty good. PSP, it's going to be mostly those minis that run fine, with a handful of actual PSP games that work as well. But there you go. Not a bad little box for the sale price anyway. Inching in closer to the $100 price point. I don't really see the value as much as it is at $50, but to each their own. Appreciate you guys watching. If there's anything specific you want me to test or follow up on, let me know down below. The follow-up video that I had already done, link will be in the description, and take a look at the arcade box review video as well. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye!